of Roswell Army Airfield, prompting a written statement the next day by U.S. Army Air Corps personnel to write that the many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. The following day, Air Force officials quickly changed their story from a flying disc to a downed weather balloon, setting off a decades-long debate amongst conspiracy theorists and legitimate researchers alike to find the truth behind what had been recovered from the New Mexico desert, leading to a 1994 disclosure by U.S. Air Force personnel that the wreckage was a high-altitude spy balloon associated with the top-secret Project Mogul, which monitored Soviet nuclear testing progress during Russia's quest to match American nuclear weapons technology. To further debunk several eyewitness accounts of dead aliens being removed from the crash site, in a 1997 follow-up report, Air Force officials explained away the bodies as parachute test dummies.
Welcome back to the second installment of this series, Who Exactly Are They? We're going to be taking a dive into the quote-unquote Black Project. Maybe get a sense of how they work, who controls them, what information they have, why we're always in the dark. And we're going to do that on the UAP phenomenon. Now, this is something I have seen a lot about. I went through a lot of rabbit holes with this, credible and non-credible. Today, I thought we would just jump in and show you what is what. What do you think? Will this change the outlook you have, your perspective on this subject? Or do you even care to know? Either way, we're jumping in. Let's go.
(1947 to 1969), the Air Force investigated thousands of UFO sightings out of genuine concern for national security.
The United States Air Force is constantly on the alert 24 hours a day. We're interested in anything that flies in our atmosphere.
The Air Force has been accused from time to time of hiding information about UFO. What do you have to say to that, Colonel Patton?
These charges are absolutely untrue. Actually, the United States Air Force releases statistics on the UFO phenomena through the Department of Defense press desk periodically, and we've always honored accredited media when they want to investigate a given specific sighting.
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.
Is there anything in the...
Yeah, okay, let me stop you right there for a minute, Chief. Sorry, guys, I know, but this is absolutely by far one of my very favorite rewind lines. It never gets old. This gets me every time. I'm not sure that I've ever met a psychopath in person. If I do, I would imagine his face and his eyes look something like this, that he says, nothing to hide whatsoever. And he looks right back at the camera, at me, like I just, raped and murdered his mother or something.
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberration.
Well, Major Kehoe, I must say that the Air Force tells us they don't question your motives, but they do question the accuracy of a good deal of your information, and for that reason they say you have been, and were they to, in a sense, throw open an invitation to all people who cite UFOs to get in touch with them once again. They'd get all kinds of cranks, hoaxers, and so forth, and you see they run down every one of these sightings, and it has cost them a tremendous amount of money to no avail over the past few years.
That's what they told you.
That is what they told me. All right, Major, about George Adamski and Howard Menger, both men claim to have talked with men from Venus. Menger claims that he's even taken a ride on a flying saucer. Do you believe them?
No.
You think they are hoaxsters?
We do not accept any reports of these so-called contactees without more evidence. We've asked them to submit their claims and take lie detector tests. We don't throw them out. We simply say we'll give you a fair chance. I think that's the least important part of the picture. The most important part is the weight of evidence from hundreds of competent people. And I'd like to name a few. Captain Richard Case, American Airlines. Captain C.S. Childs, Eastern Airlines. Captain T. Kravitz, TWA. Robert Dickus, TWA. Colonel Donald J. Blakesley, U.S. Air Force, a wing commander. I could go down the list of people who know what they're doing, and they're still on duty, they're still flying.
Major Kehoe, what would you like to see done about flying saucers that is not currently being done? What steps would you like to see taken?
I think the American people should write to their congressman and insist that open hearings be held by the Senate Committee on the Permanent Committee on Government Operations, which has been looking into this for 6 months.
An Air Force spokesman told us this last week. He said members of the Senate subcommittee have talked with us already, and they have shown no interest in conducting any hearings on this issue.
I talked with the chief investigator within the last 2 weeks. I gave him a lot of information, and I gave him data on one case where an airliner was sent to chase one of these things, and the passengers kept in ignorance of it at that time. That involves 2 government agencies beside the Air Force, which has refused to release the report. And I'll say this: if you were to get, if the committee were to get Ruppelt, Major Fournet, several colonels around that time, Major General Garland, who was on the project, there would be a big revelation, because the Air Force is simply treating the American people like children. They don't trust them with the facts.
It began with Project Sign, continued with Project Grudge, and officially became known as Project Blue Book in 1952. The 3 projects comprised the largest government investigation of UFOs ever undertaken. Project Blue Book's objectives were to scientifically analyze UFO data and determine whether UFOs posed a threat to national security. Of the more than 12,000 Project Blue Book UFO sightings, the vast majority were explained as birds, planes, stars, or clouds. 6% had no conventional explanation, and the Air Force classified them as unidentified.
You can't tell us about, can you give us some sort of an understanding of like what you're talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Without being specific?
Yeah. High resolution video of, I can't say what platform it was taken from. I can't say where it was taken from.
Okay.
But an object that, do you know how large an offshore oil derrick is? They're huge, right?
Yeah.
They're like almost like a small city, right? They're like one city block. They're huge. They're enormous things. There is a video that shows one of these objects underwater that goes by. The speed was calculated between 450 and 550 knots underwater, and it was bigger than the offshore derrick that it was passing, because you could see in the video the offshore derrick, and you could see this thing zip right by it.
Jesus.
Yeah, because that's super important, Joe. We have transmedium vehicles, right? We have things like seaplanes, and it's a plane and it can float on water. But let's face it, a seaplane is neither a really good plane or a really good boat, because it's a compromise. It's a design compromise between an object that you want to perform in the air and in the sea. And that's why it's neither really good at both. But what we are seeing doesn't have any of that attributable compromise. It's not, these objects aren't slowing down. They're not changing their performance capabilities. They can do the same thing that we're seeing in the air and possibly in space and even underwater. So that is a fundamentally different type of technology than we are used to dealing with.
Luis Elizondo is a former intelligence officer with the Department of Defense. He claims he was the director of AATIP, the Pentagon's UFO program from 2010 to 2017. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has defended this guy and said he actually was pretty prominent in the government working on these things. Here's what he had to say.
I remember the conversation very well. This is a person I respected tremendously, very, very senior person. He's told me, he said, "Lou, I want you to stop doing this." I said, okay, sir, I certainly can, but may I ask why? And he says, well, we already know what it is. Now, at that moment, I honestly thought maybe it was our own technology. I was running up against some super uber secret sap, and they were telling me to stop. And I said, okay, sir, so it's ours? And he said, no, that's not what I'm saying. And he said, he asked me point blank, have you read your Bible lately? And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with that. And I said, well, sir, I think I know what it says. Where are you going with this? And he said, well, then you would know that these things are demonic and we should not be pursuing them. Yeah. And he wasn't kidding. That's exactly how he felt.
So this is a Pentagon. This is a Department of Defense official saying, stop looking at UFOs because they're demonic.
Correct.
Correct.
Especially if they have the ability to travel at insane speeds and go undetected. And
well, it depends. Like that. Okay, so the template that you're using to understand this is like science fiction, right? These are an advanced race of beings from somewhere else. But the template that every other society before us has used is a spiritual one. Mm-hmm. There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a supernatural world. It's acting on us all the time for good and bad. Every society has thought this before ours. In fact, every society in all recorded history has thought that until, I'll be specific, August 1945, when we dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And all of a sudden, the West is just officially secular. We're God. There is no God but us. And that's the world that we have grown up in. But that's an anomaly. Like, no one else has ever thought that. There's never been a society that thought that. Every other society has assumed, and they've had all kinds of different explanations, and the details differ, but the core idea does not differ, never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times. And so to someone born before or living before 1945, I think it would have been much more obvious that this is the thing that every society has written about.
Let's start with Lockheed Skunk Works.
Ben Rich was the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works and acknowledged towards the end of his period there that they had technologies that could, quote, take ET home. He also stated there were no private conversations anywhere on the earth. True. Mm-hmm. No matter what your encryption is. And also he said that anything you imagine, we have already done at the Skunk Works. But then there's another division that is the deep black. I want to make a distinction between the black budget and highly classified, legally overseen projects. Those began to be studied back long before I was born, and I turned 68 this week, so you can imagine how long we've had these things. We actually mastered gravity control in October 1954. The senators and the congressmen in the White House, they are not read in to these other projects. They simply aren't. These sort of operations, as Eisenhower warned, have just gotten out of constitutional legal oversight. So I call those the illegal secret government projects.
And unleash a new lethal technology.
Extremely high speeds, Mach 5, 6. That would make these cruise missiles almost impossible to defend against.
098 firm, we have splash. Stand by for PDA.
So that's going to wrap up today's video. I'm glad you took time out of your day to hang out. I know there's other places you can be, watching other people do other things. So thank you for the time. And as always, thanks for coming to hang out. And I'll see you guys next time.
You stopped off for ice cream. When the fuck did we get ice cream?